Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Russ, along with his wife Gemma, founded two Drifters Distillery in 2015 with the goal of producing carbon negative rum. With a background in chemistry focused on carbon capture, Russ is dedicated to raising awareness about CO2's impact. Their distillery not only creates exceptional rum, but also sparks conversation about sustainability, aiming to make a tangible impact on climate change. You're very welcome, Russ. Thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, if I can take you back to the very beginning, what were yourself and Gemma doing before setting up the business, and kind of what led you to decide to stop what you were doing and kick the business off?
Interesting set of circumstances that led us to that, really. So yeah, like you said in the introduction, my background was in chemistry. So just before we set up the distillery, which was 2019, we were traveling all over the place basically because of my work. So as an academic chemist, you've got 1, 2 years positions here and there. We were in Vancouver, and then next minute we were in Swansea, and kind
Yeah,
of that whole contrast
bit of a
and
difference.
journey, exactly, big difference. But it just meant that you never really felt that settled. And we had a daughter at the time, so she was something like 14 weeks old when we moved to Vancouver, and then 2.5 by the time we got back to the UK. And I think we wanted her to have a base. And actually, both of us are from Devon. We're from Exeter, and we wanted her to grow up in Devon like we did. And so part of the motivation for the distillery was to have a base to do something and keep us there. However, there are no kind of chemistry jobs here in Exeter, and there are no chemistry jobs in kind of really local to Devon. And so um, the the need to have a chemistry related job is kind of, yeah, within me, and the need to have something here in Devon was kind of, so those two things kind of came together. And then separate to that, Gemma and I have a real passion for rum, so
Mm.
we quite like making rum, and wanted to understand how to do that. We, in our spare time, in kind of my last research position in Swansea, we've been making beer in the garage, and we've been selling it. And kind of that's how the business kind of started up. And we thought, right, actually, we could probably take the plunge. We sold the house in Swansea. We invested fully in the distillery, and that's kind of how it started. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, I guess the last bit on it is just that the time in Vancouver was hugely inspirational for two reasons. One is they have a great craft beer, craft spirits scene. So there's quite a vibrant, you go block to block, basically tasting different things. And the other aspect is on that West Coast, they just go for it. They just set up a business without the fear of failure so much. So that was inspiring.
Yeah, I must say I've tasted a few nice craft beers on Granville Island in Vancouver in my time. It's a good spot.
Yes, it is.
Um, but even okay, it sounds like you were inspired by an entrepreneurial environment in Vancouver, but it was still a pretty big step to just decide to sell the house and go full hog into the business.
Yeah.
What kind of, how much was there much planning around kind of you were you always going to go into the alcohol based business, or were there a number of businesses being discussed before you kind of made the decision to say, okay, we're going to go for a distillery?
No, I think it was always going to be alcohol based, just based on the hobbies that we'd kind of ended up doing. I guess maybe it could have been food, but it was always around that kind of food and drink production. And I think, yeah, what happened at the very beginning is that we sold the house and bought equipment, but the license that you have to get for your distilling takes several months to come through. And the process is kind of backward because you have to buy all the equipment, install all the equipment, have a working commercial premises, and then they'll come and interview you to see if they can give you a license. And that means that you've got to commit, fully commit to knowing, when actually in reality we'd never made rum before. We didn't know that we could do it. We backed ourselves, but you didn't really know you could do it. So what we did was we hedged a little bit and had a brewery at the start because we knew we could do beer. And
Yeah.
in our naive kind of thinking, we thought, yeah, we can easily just make beer to pay for us to get better at making rum, right? And in hindsight, that's so silly. But and equally, we made maybe two batches of beer before we didn't have to make any ever again. And yeah, rum, it turned out, was pretty good, and we just sold everything we've ever made ever since, and the demand's been there. So
Amazing. And what did that look like in terms of that period of having to front up this kind of capital to invest in the business before you were able to get into place to commercialize it?
it looked like moving in with your in-laws. It's why I was chuckling. Yeah, so I moved in with Gemma's parents, and yeah, and then you've got to think about the timing of all of this. So this is
Yeah.
April 2019 we start selling. So maybe 8 or 9 months of trading, living with your in-laws, great, it's all going well, and then bang, pandemic.
Mm.
So it kind of quickly changed into something different. We're spoiled because they're great people to live with anyway, so it was kind of easy. But also they spend half their time, or did, in Portugal, and so you kind of had that split where you had some time with them and time off, and so it worked really well as a kind of setup for us.
Nice.
Obviously, they weren't allowed to go during the pandemic and so on, but now, of course, we've moved out and everything's kind of a little bit more normal. I wouldn't say we're
Yeah.
back to where we were before, but it's still part of the journey.
Yeah. And talk me through the process. As you kind of alluded to, you've never made rum before. You're passionate about it. So how is it going back to your kind of inner chemist to discover and think through the process? Like what did that look like for you guys?
Well, there's a large amount of chemistry that goes into it, and it's really just a big chemistry lab that ends up being a distillery. Yeah, distilling was the day job. So the specific area of chemistry I was involved in was organic chemistry, and that is, I mean, the day job is distilling. There you just can't drink the products, but it's the same kind of idea. And so the principles all apply to making alcohol. Then it's about understanding the fermentation, which is kind of a bit more biotechnology. But equally, I've always had an interest in the biological side and understanding yeast. And yeah, that kind of fit with all of the learnings that I'd done around the beer. So there isn't a lot of literature on rum. You look at whiskey, you look at beer,
Yeah.
and you really dig into the geekiness of it all. There's loads and loads endlessly written, but not about rum.
Well, yeah, I suppose digging into that, like we've seen a plethora of gin and whiskey brands start to proliferate. Certainly the Irish and the UK, if not European markets, over the last number of years. Gin, obviously, advantages are you can kind of whip it up very quickly. Don't need it to ferment for long. Whiskey's challenges are you need years before it's good to be sold.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's got a lot of heritage. You can get your hands on the right brand and things like that. So. I'm completely ignorant as to rum. So what does the process look like in comparison to say whiskey or gin? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I always start our tours here at the distillery with the kind of first bit of rum, which is rum is the lawless spirit. And it really is. So it really only has one rule, and that's that
Yeah,
it must be made from something from the sugarcane. So
yeah,
once you get past that, it doesn't have all the strict kind of what's the best kind of descriptive term? But whiskey can be quite serious. Gin is very it's gin, and rum is a bit freer. It
okay,
also suffers because of that, because it then becomes slightly misunderstood as to how you drink it. Half the world's top 10 cocktails are rum based, and lots of people don't even know that is the case. Equally, the biggest brand in the world are kind of Bacardi and others, and not everyone knows that that's a rum. And so it's a category that is without rules, therefore a bit misunderstood. But yeah, making it from sugarcane, we make ours from molasses, so that's
hmm,
the refined waste you get when you make your granulated white sugar. The leftovers are molasses. And it's got a really strong kind of flavor to it. Molasses is a bit treacle thick, and that kind of dominates the flavor profile. But it's a very, very broad category that has a remarkable variety in there. It's just dominated, unfortunately, has historically been dominated by cheap and cheerful brands, I guess.
you won't be find a bottle of Captain Morgan's in Russ and Gemma's house, I assume.
No, no. definitely not. But there are great rums, and that's kind of how
Yeah.
it started. Our first date was rum tasting, and I used to buy a bottle every payday when I was working in between university time. And yeah, basically, you kind of there's so much to try. There's a lot of variety.
Yeah. Uh, in terms of kind of the process and kind of where you are now compared to where you were at the beginning, obviously a big passionate element for you guys as a business is what you do with CO2, whether that's carbon emissions or how you capture, what you're doing to avoid it. Has that always been kind of core to the business, or as you refined your process, it's adapted along the way? Kind of curious to hear a bit more about that.
So the carbon negative footprint that the distillery has, it may be best if I just explain exactly how we achieve it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But the motivation goes back to the chemistry I used to do. So the research was always in carbon capture, carbon storage, trying to turn CO2 into any kind of product that has value to mean that someone wants to keep hold of it. Whereas the kind of worthless stuff that we chuck in the atmosphere, if that was worth something, you might hold on to it a bit more. So that was always my chemistry research was in that area. And that meant that I met lots and lots of cool people with great technology for things you could do with CO2 instead. And that led to meeting Climeworks, who we partner with now, who have a direct air capture technology. So it essentially will suck CO2 from the atmosphere. It's then converted into stone, so it's mineralized, and it's stored underground. So this offers you and the planet a way to physically remove CO2 from the atmosphere, to reduce the levels. And that technology completely blew my mind when I saw it. And still does, really. But it offered us a way to permanently remove CO2. So knowing that we want to set up a rum distillery, we knew that there would be impacts because the sugar isn't going to grow anywhere near the UK. And that's true, right? It has to travel a long way, and there's a large amount of emissions associated. So that's the first thing. That's the kind of starting point, right? What we do at the distillery in order to achieve a carbon negative footprint is think about the full life cycle of our products. So from that sugarcane plantation, which for us is predominantly Brazil, it's got a journey across the Atlantic to North Africa, where it's refined and then turned into molasses. That molasses then taken up to Bristol and down to us at the distillery next to on the M5, and all of those parts and all of that process causes a lot of emissions, about a third of our bottle. But getting the ingredients to the distillery is one part of the life cycle. Then, of course, you've got to process it. So there we've got some control. But then you subsequently have to ship it to your customers. And all of that part forms the life cycle. Equally, they use it. So they'll put ice cubes in, a mixer. All those things have emissions associated. And then you've got the final step, which is to recycle or landfill, hopefully recycle the glass bottle. And that still requires a diesel lorry to take it to the recycling centre and so on and so on. So there's a lot of emissions tied up in the full life cycle of the product. We then calculate that and commit to removing more CO2 using Climeworks technology than we've caused. So that's how we can then say, right, we have this much emissions cost calculation. Here it is published on our website. And this is how much we then pay Climeworks to remove for us. And theirs is a very verifiable and transparent way to capture the CO2 and turn it into stone. So for us, that represents the only true way to achieve carbon negative footprint.
Amazing. And in terms of kind of customers, have they kind of gravitated towards that story or understood it, or is it just something that they kind of discover along the way?
Well, I mean, I've only partially explained it and quite briefly. So, to capture someone's imagination and get it all in very quickly when they just look at a bottle is really, really hard. And the biggest challenge for us marketing the product. So first and foremost, I mean, I would always say that first and foremost, you have to have the top quality rum, right? Unless your product's good and better than the alternative, who cares about the sustainability? That's the reality. I should say that the kind of the big thing about that Climeworks and why the world doesn't do it is that it's hugely expensive. It's too expensive for now, but that drives us as a distillery to reduce the footprint as much as possible. So when I said we had control over the process. We have a fully electric, 100% renewable powered distillery, electric vehicles that do the local deliveries and sales calls, and all of those decisions we can control and influence our footprint.
Excuse my ignorance, but how do you create 100% renewable distillery? Like, do you get your own connectivity to the grid? Like, how can you guarantee 100% renewable to the distillery?
Yeah, it's a valid question, and we have to work within the confines of what we've got. We're in a leased unit on an industrial estate, so we're connected to the mains. We
Yeah,
purchase through SSE, the 100% renewable green tariff that they
gotcha.
sell. But is that strictly 100% renewable? You're still part of the mix of the grid. So you're buying a portion of it. So in reality, that's difficult. Equally, as part of our calculation, we include a little bit for the transmission, of course, because you cause emissions transmitting electricity as well. So
Yeah.
it's not without emissions.
No, but I think you definitely have an understanding of end to end at its core, which is
We
the
have
most important.
actually this bit I'm running in now is and it's lovely and sunny today, but we have solar panels on the bar which is next door
Yeah,
to the distillery. So yeah, we're running off grid at the moment, but
awesome.
it's a bit much to turn the stills on.
Yeah, fair.
You need an awful lot of solar very early in the morning because
Yeah,
they went on at 2 o'clock this morning. So yeah, you know.
nice. Then I suppose going back out from say the production for a second, there's a whole business aspect to this. So
Mm.
yes, you can go make a super tasty rum that's super delicious, but how have you found getting it out? So you talked about 2019 getting up and running, starting to build customers, pandemic hits. How within those kind of first years, 2019, 2020, 2021, are you finding customers, getting it out to market? What did that look like?
Yes, yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey for the distillery, and the timing, I guess, if you look, if you zoom out a lot, is terrible. But in reality, our product is best suited to an on-trade, so a bar, a restaurant, a hotel setting.
Yeah,
Right, that's the best place for people to get it. It's a premium rum, so it's an expensive purchase to buy a £35 bottle of rum, not knowing what it tastes like at all. That's the reality. So, best place to get customers is to have them in a bar trying a cocktail. Someone's made it expertly and delicious, and we have plenty of bartenders that do that. Um, that's the best kind of route in. But that didn't exist in 2019 and 2020. 2019, we're so young that we're still just basically doing trade shows, fairs, any village hall that would take us
yeah,
just to show anyone. And then during the pandemic, it's kind of a funny time. So for everyone, we did virtual distillery tours. So I'd sit with my headset on and walk people around, and then we'd send them a taster pack and say, look, come and have a look how this is made. Because it's cool that we've got this rum distillery where you can actually see it physically being produced. Try all these different rums and I'll talk you through how they're made. And that really captured a lot of people. So we grabbed a load of people there. And we used to sell, people were very open at that time, I guess, to trying things online and trying different spirits. Rum was kind of talked about as the new gin. It never will be, but it was hyped. And yeah, I guess that kind of gave us enough of a base to kind of build on. Then once we moved out of that phase and everything kind of opened back up, it was a case of, right, can we educate and kind of build on that? And subsequently, it's been about bars, restaurants, hotels that have kind of sustainable credentials or would like to be more sustainable and are kind of leaning into that. So they'll have a sustainable cocktail menu, sustainable serves. And there, where you're thinking, like I said, the top 10 cocktails being rum-based, half of them are rum-based, it should be us, right? If you're a sustainable organization looking to stock a rum, who are you choosing? Because there's no one else calculating their CO2 emissions with as much detail and telling you, bang, we remove all of that plus a bit more. And so our job has been finding those
Mm.
and really capitalizing on that.
And how have you found that? Because I can imagine competition is pretty stiff. I'm just thinking of like some like Pernod Ricard where they have like graduate programs where they have teams of people dedicated to some spirit categories in there to go in. get into the bars, get to know the bartenders, run competitions, mixers, really get it in that way? Like, how do you compete with that? Like, what's your strategy been?
You have to be smarter because they just don't have those deep pockets. I mean, our
Hmm.
entire operation is a rounding error for
Yeah.
any of those guys. I think you have to lean into the fact that we are people physically making stuff. We can talk you through a process. There's very few distilleries where it's kind of still one organization doing all of it to produce from raw materials through to labeled product. So you show them, you show them that aspect going on. You go to visit them. You bring the managers, the general managers down to the distillery, and you say, "Look, here you go. Touch it, smell it," and you engage, and then you just explain the story, the reason why we do things. The same story I'm telling you, and it does capture the imagination when they go, "This bottle, yeah, that guy came and spoke, and he explained how they actually do that." And you're very disconnected from lots of other of those spirits. And I think people do tend to see through that.
And so obviously that gives you real good strength in terms of your local community, really getting people to understand what it is you do and how you do it. Have you then just focused then in the immediate area to grow the business, or have you looked at a wider field?
The local area is the very hardest. So Devon is
Okay.
absolutely the hardest for us to sell, and we sell probably the least here in kind of Devon and Cornwall, and that is a shame, but it's to do with the price of the product. So our premium rum sells best in cocktail bars in major cities. So London, Bristol, Birmingham, those are great hubs for us in the
Yes.
UK. And we've been building on that kind of cocktail bar scene to because you've got the ability to kind of command a price premium. We're not outrageously priced, so it's always a balance between being realistic. But I guess that's where we focused in the UK in that setting. We now export though across Europe. We have excellent partners in Denmark, Italy, France, and Germany. And we've exported to as far as Peru, back to Canada, so back to Vancouver. That was very cool. And
Yes.
yeah, it's growing. It's still growing. We're hopefully about to sign a deal with Australia. So to see the runs over there would be pretty cool as well. Although all of those things come with a big carbon penalty. So
Well, I'm sure you're the man to counterbalance it. I suppose as you're thinking of that export element to it, have you had a strategy for each of those countries, or have you looked for channel partners that specialize in getting you into market or into trade in different areas? What's your strategy been for that?
I'd love to say that it was strategy that achieved all those things, but it's more a case of meeting the people, the right people at the right time. So, for whatever reason, and there's been different stories behind each one, but we've met the people that have the vision to say we would like a sustainable offering. We want our portfolio to have these spirits here, and they naturally choose us as the rum partner of choice there because we can offer real transparency, and particularly in the EU where the rules are becoming much stricter, and I guess the UK will follow, but basically you can't just greenwash your way out of it.
Mm,
They're looking for transparent brands that they can lean into, and we offer that as well as being completely delicious, right? So the thing is, you've always got to have that product there.
for sure.
In terms of strategy to kind of to take on all of those, it's finding the right partner is the absolute critical thing. So as soon as you've got the right partner who understands the brand and buys into what we're trying to achieve, then they know how to kind of roll it out across their network. And yeah, it's been fantastic watching that program.
I'd say with the non-English speaking markets you're getting into, like Denmark or Italy, that you've managed. Yes, you can find a partner that gets you, but then there's a huge amount of localization that goes into how you portray a brand and everything. Of course, not just within the actual words themselves, but in other nuances. How have you managed that?
To visit. So I've been to visit when I was in Italy in January, and we did a big trade show with our partners. So they're very much a wine-focused distributor, and they have thousands and thousands of wines on their portfolio. And that meant that when we go to the trade show, there's thousands and thousands of people that came. And we had a spirits section with a little English community where we had a few brands next to each other. My Italian is dreadful. I am working on it, but yeah, they were very very patient. But we had a lady called Elena who she would walk between our different English stands because we were all hopeless actually. She'd translate to the people that didn't speak any English and only spoke Italian, and that. I guess it's as basic as that, and being honest about, look, we're here. This is how we make it. Show all this stuff, and people sell to people. So that lent into some of the local customers there. We were in Parma at the time, but that rolled out to they invited all of their sales team. And then once you've got the sales team in front of you, and they know their districts, they know their regions way better than you're ever going to know. They are the ones that you need to really explain the story to, relate to, understand, just build up a relationship. And that's kind of how we rolled it out. Italy was good for that. Copenhagen, so Denmark as well. There we visited last month in May, and same thing. You go and meet them. I did a masterclass in Copenhagen, met a few of the key people in the city, and that is just powerful. To say this is how we do it. This is why we do it. About the carbon footprint, about the rum making, and they love it.
Noticed any differences in markets where government has a big influence over alcohol sales? So talk about selling in Canada, how alcohol is purchased is very driven at a governmental level. Similar in the Nordics, which would be quite different from Mediterranean. Did you see any advantages to selling into countries that have a more government influence over how alcohol is sold over others, or were not something that's relevant?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's harder to get in, but I think once you're in, you have a committed volume. The Nordics are an interesting one because we do try, and we have an agent there who helps us, but it's mainly retail. So, like I've said, that our rum is very much geared towards and should be consumed in a bar first and foremost, and like the retail stuff will come later. So yeah, it's hard. It's a challenge at the moment to get into those markets, to enter the on trade, because that's a very kind of closed system. Canada was an interesting one where they did a trial, and there it's province by province. So we only have a relationship with BC, British Columbia. But Ontario, for example, that area, that's the biggest alcohol buyer in the world. So just one province government organization. So it's a huge target, but it's a kind of 18-month, 2-year process to get in. And you still need a little bit of luck to get that done.
For sure. And then I suppose just looking internally for a second, how have you set the team up within Two Drifters as you've started to grow out the business? What kind of functions have you needed to start to bring it in, or what kind of functions have you had to perform slightly differently now than you did at the beginning?
No, you still end up being a jack of all trades for now. We haven't got to the stage that I'm not IT, HR, and all those departments. But I guess Gemma and I split it out. So her background I should have talked about, but she was in medical sales before. So she's very much the marketing and the selling, and she's absolutely superb on the social media. You should follow us on Instagram or on LinkedIn to kind of see her work, because it's great. It gives you real background insight into the process and all of our stories and the updates. But that is kind of her divide. So she takes after that side of it. I kind of split off into the either presenting about the distillery, or finance, the kind of the dry stuff. And do I love the finance? I don't love the finance. So we, when I get to the stage that I can offload that kind of stuff, but it's also, it's similar to carbon accounting. So I guess that's why I end up with that kind of pocket of stuff. And then we have Mark, who's our distillery manager, and he runs the kind of day-to-day operations. But we are at the distillery a team of 3. So we all pitch in when needed, and I was here at 5 a.m. distilling this morning for that reason. But the sales side, so the real sales, is outsourced, I guess. So we have a team in London of about 14 They deal with the chasing around all these accounts and making sure that everyone's happy and finding new accounts and so on. The partners in the other countries, they all have sales teams that roll out. You pay through the bottle sales, but that's kind of how the model works. It doesn't make sense for us necessarily to have those operations and those people employed internally. You'd never be able to afford that many, I guess.
Yeah. I suppose what's the kind of horizon for yourself and Gemma? What is it that you're striving to do in terms of take the business to next?
Yeah, so our ambition is to capture 1% of the UK rum market, right? It's £1 billion industry, and
Hmm.
that feels achievable before the end of the decade, certainly. And then to roll on to 1% of the global rum market, which is obviously a bigger prize. And that kind of drives us to think, okay, well, if you need 1% of the rum market, you need 1% of people that drink rum to be Two Drifters customers. And that means, I guess the biggest lesson we took at the beginning was that isn't everyone. And there's plenty of people that tell you they don't like rum and that they don't like your rum, or but you need to have that kind of realism that it's not everyone's a
Yep.
Two Drifters customer. Yeah, I guess the horizon is we're in a phase at the moment of trying to raise more funds. We need a bigger marketing budget. We basically find that people that do hear the story, taste the liquid, understand what Two Drifters is all about, they become customers. So how do we get more of those is the game. And it's just cranking the wheel on that at the moment. So, and obviously it takes money to host events, to have people at the distillery, to kind of have festivals, to have all these activations where everyone goes, oh my gosh, we love Two Drifters. We got a great one at the moment at Queen's, where we have the rum and
Oh, great.
they're like loft bars there. So that's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
cool for
yeah.
the next 2 weeks. And we will be at Troon and Silverstone for the golf and the F1. So that's kind of all cool stuff like
Fantastic.
that. But
Yes, yeah, yeah,
you need a bigger budget to kind of push it, and we definitely need more people at the distillery because I don't know how many more 5 a.m.s I can do
yeah.
this month. But
Yeah.
those are the challenges. So in the short term, it's about getting the funds to really accelerate on the trajectory. We're doubling in sales each year, so we want to continue that. The medium term is to head towards 1% of the UK, and then of course accelerate beyond. Fill up our capacity. We're only running about 20% in reality. So
Okay. Amazing.
we need to push to sell more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you've given yourself an amazing launch pad, and the core element of having a passion for rum, but also how it's made is it sounds like that's what's making you win. You're having a competitive advantage with these external partners, with regards to the process, but also, as you say, you're never going to win unless it's super delicious. So yeah, I just want to say like a big thank you for taking some time out this morning. Sounds like a very busy schedule to
Always.
come and chat and give us a part of the story. But to do what you've done in sort of short space of time is no mean feat. So hopefully the funding will follow in due course, and the 5 a.m.s will become less frequent. But
Automated.
yeah, look forward to trying two
Yeah.
drifters. I'm in Silverstone in a few weeks. I will make sure to check it out.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Russ. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Good.
That was great.